Hi there. I'm Ray Williams, Director of Education at the Blanton Museum of Art at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm also what they call an avid horseman. Welcome to the latest in a series of curated conversations. This evening, in recognition that the first weekend of May is usually associated with the running of the Kentucky Derby, our topic is the main event, horses and art. We'll be looking at and discussing a handful of the nearly 400 works of art that turned up in a search of the Blanton collections with the keyword horses. We have with us three Blanton curators who will now introduce themselves.
I'm Rosario Granados. I'm the Marilyn Toma Associate Curator, Art of the Spanish Americas.
Hello. I'm Florencia Bazzano. Assistant Curator of Latin American Art at the Blanton.
Hi everyone, I'm Chrissy Zappella. I am the Fellow of European Painting and Sculpture, and I'm very happy to be here. Happy Cinco de Mayo, everyone.
Now, before we get started, just a few things to note. Your audio is muted, so no one can hear you, and only the panelists are visible on screen. We'll be taking your questions from the Q&A window. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons, including one labeled Q&A. Click on that to type and send in your questions for us. Please do try to use the Q&A function for questions instead of the chat functions. I think we're ready to go. Let's see the first image, please. So I chose this as an opening image. It's a lithograph by Thomas Hart Benton called Homeward Bound, the Race. It speaks to both the speed we associate with certain breeds of horses and a mythic quality the horse often seems to embody. Strength, freedom, courage, even nobility of character are traditionally associated with horses. Horses have been our partners through much of human history. They've helped us in the domains of agriculture, hunting, transportation, and conquest. This image by Jericho shows the relationship between a very strong horse who helps provide livelihood for a family, but also has a need for human care. So you see the horse is unharnessed, he's been working all day, and the boy is offering oats to keep him going. Next, please. So artists in different times and places have featured horses in images of pageantry, portraiture, religious, and mythological narratives. Here is an image that refers to the ancient story from the Loves of the Gods, in which the Titan Cronus, in the form of a very good-looking stallion, seduces the nymph Philyra. Their offspring was the centaur Chiron, who was taught the arts of music, archery, medicine, and prophecy by Apollo and Artemis. And Chiron went on to tutor such great ancient heroes as Ajax, Aeneas, Theseus, Jason, Perseus, and Achilles. Let's see the next image by Donato Creti from the European Painting Collection. This is Chiron, sort of a paint centaur, educating Achilles in the art of archery. Now, I was digging around for quotes about horses. Paul Mellon, the art collector and breeder of thoroughbreds, his horse Sea Hero won the Kentucky Derby in 1993. Paul Mellon once said that the horse is an archetypal symbol which will always find ways to stir up deep and moving ancestral memories in every human being. So Chrissy, let's look at one of the paintings that you chose to feature from the Blanton's collection of European paintings.
Oh, well, before we do that, we're going to look at something else. But let me just say hi to everyone at home. Thank you again for being here on Cinco de Mayo and celebrating the season of horse racing with us. We're all big horse fans here at the Blanton. We're really excited to do this. Stacy, can I please have my first slide? Thank you. So this is not at the Blanton. If you come,
But it is ancestral memory, huh?
It's very ancestral. It's about 19,000 years old is how ancestral it is. So this is in a cave painting, as you can see in Lascaux in France. This is not a cave I personally own. It is in France. So it's at least 17,000 years old, maybe 2,000 or so years older than that. But why I wanted to start with this is because you can see right from the beginning, from the very beginning that people started making images, our relationship with horses was in the fore of our minds from the very, very beginning of time when we started to draw. We started to draw horses. So we were thinking about ourselves in relationship to horses and what they could do for us as we were beginning to civilize ourselves. So I'm really enjoying my margarita. How many of you at home are joining us with a drink today? Flores, Ray, are you? Oh, I saw a hand raised. So if y'all hit Option Y or Alt Y, if you have a PC, you can raise your hand and tell us that you have a drink. And I see a lot of hands raised. I know a lot of those people with their hands raised. So I'm not surprised. Excellent. Okay, so now that we're all in the right mood for European art, we are drinking. Let's go to the next slide, please, and start looking at some Blanton paintings. So this painting I love, and I'm really excited to share it with all of you at home because it is not currently on view. So we're getting a little behind the scenes. This is downstairs, and hopefully someday soon we'll all be able to see it in person. And this is a painting of Orpheus charming the animals. So let's start with the artist. The artist is Sinibaldo Scorza. Now he's an Italian, and he's probably not an artist that you're familiar with, but believe me, he's very, very famous for his animal paintings. So there are multiple versions of this painting. If you Google it, you might find 4 or 5 different versions. He was also very famous for painting images of Noah's Arks, because you can imagine how many animals you get to do in that. Here we have Orpheus. So he's mythological, right? We know. Now here's one of the weirder things I think about this painting. So in the Renaissance, they believed Orpheus had been an actual person who lived. He was not mythological. He was a great philosopher and writer and musician. And that's why you see him out in the landscape with his instrument. And he's playing a song, and all of the animals have come far and wide to hear him. And so Orpheus, as you can imagine, got likened to Christ because Christ has the lion and the lamb lay down together. And in the crowd of animals around Orpheus, there are so many weird animals, right? So there's a monkey above his head. There's a peacock at the bottom left. You see his beautiful feathers coming off. There's an ostrich even. And then at the left of the painting, there's this beautiful white horse. And you can see he has a little bit of dabbling on his shoulder, a little dabbling on his hind, and barring across his legs. Now, back in the 1600s when this painting was made, we did not have the breeds that we have today, but they were in the process of breeding horses so that we would eventually have the breeds that we have today that race in the races that we love. This horse is probably closest related to a Percheron, which is a draft horse. So that's a horse that's going to do work around a farm, right? Ray, would you say that's right? You're the horse expert. Yeah, you're muted. You're muted. Ray, Ray's gonna unmute himself. There he is.
I'm muted because of the rooster that's making so much noise in my neighborhood. Oh, and the dog. Well, yeah, Percherons, they're known for pulling things. So they could be working on a farm or pulling a carriage in town. Looks like a Percheron to me, but
yeah,
of course early.
Exactly. So one of the really cool things I think about this is like, why would you picture an ostrich next to a percheron, right? So I think there's like a couple of reasons to do this. One reason is to show how great Orpheus is, right? That all of these animals come in the forest to listen to him. Okay, so that's obvious. Now, why else? Well, if you're an artist and you want to show like, look, I know all these different animals. There's elephants in the background. There's ostriches. There's the horse. There's a cow. There's a type of deer. There's a wolf. There's a bear. You're showing a wide range of skills when you do this. And not all of these animals were known to him, right? So he's really showing his imagination. Now, let's look at that percheron a little more closely. You might know percherons because of probably, honestly, the most famous horse painting in European art, which is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which we're going to look at next. Stacy, can you advance the slide? Thank you. This is Rosa Bonheur's The Horse Fair. This is a giant painting. This painting is about 16 feet by 8 feet. So when you go to the Met and see this painting, you feel like you're at the horse fair. And you can see these beautiful white percherons with the dabbling that we saw in the Sinibaldo Sforza. And there they are looking very powerful and emotive and evocative and running around, and not the same kind of descriptive way he was in the Sforza. It's more about the power and the majesty and the energy of this picture. What do you guys think? Would you say that's right?
I remember the first time I went to the Metropolitan Museum at the age of 19, I saw this painting and I just blew me away. I love those horses and the energy.
Right, you feel like you're there, like at the fair in Paris.
And when I think about the horse fair, in Chinese tradition, you see pictures of horses sort of lined up to be assessed. And in Chinese tradition, the person who can judge a horse is seen to be very wise and also able to judge human character.
Oh, wow. So we just got a question, were any of the artists horsemen or women themselves? Well, all of the artists that I study ever were horse people, because this is far before the invention of the car. So while they may not have been accomplished horse people, I have no idea what that would mean in the 1600s, but I bet they rode horses. Now that we're talking about the power of the horse, let's move on to the next image. And I love this painting. It is on view. Now, this painting is really stunning. It's by Daniele Crespi, and it's called The Conversion of St. Paul. Could also be called The Conversion of Saul, or The Conversion on the Road to Damascus. It can have 3 different titles. All of these titles, of course, we give them to them later. In the Renaissance, they're not giving paintings titles. And this painting, I love this. This is often, Daniele Crespi is a great Italian artist, and this is considered his greatest painting in America. It is on view. I hope that you come and see us when we reopen and see this painting, and I think you're going to love it. What I love about this painting is the way the horse is reacting. So Saul of Tarsus is a Roman military leader, and he has been persecuting Christians. Like, that is his number one thing that he loves to do, is just like go and find Jesus's followers and persecute them. So he is going from Jerusalem to Damascus, where Christ is supposed to be, to persecute some Christians. He's like really excited about it. And then he has a vision, and he is blinded and struck while he's riding his horse to Damascus, and falls off the horse. The horse rears. And at that moment, he sees in his mind this blinding light and hears Christ, Jesus, who says to him, "I'm Jesus, be one of my followers, stop this." And of course, Saul, now St. Paul, realizes the error of his ways and will go on to be St. Paul. And instead of persecuting Christians, goes on to be the person that writes all the letters that actually makes Christianity a worldwide religion. Why I love this painting is because this horse is going bananas, right? So in the story, the only person who knows that this is going on at all is Saul, and everyone else doesn't see anything. So this horse, to me, seems to be like very cued into this sixth sense that we believe that animals have, that they understand what is going on that is not there, right? So nobody else is really reacting. They're going on and trying to help Saul, who's fallen to the ground. And they're, the two Romans helping him and are looking at each other. But this horse is freaking out. his eyes are rolled back into his head. He's super expressive, and his mouth is twisted. I looked at this painting with my sister, who owns a horse farm in New Jersey, where we have a lot of horses. And she found it hard to look at because she thought the horse's face was so disturbingly grotesque in the way that it's reacting.
Well, being really manhandled, you can see that the fellow's really concerned about this horse getting out of control. He's very obstreperous and excited, and is like, he's really got his hand in there on the bit.
Yeah. You know what I love about this painting, Ray? I mean, this is a big favorite of mine, but Saul is blind, and the other people don't know this yet. And Saul is looking down, so we can't really see his eyes, but we see the horse's eye. And so the horse's eye and the vision of the horse becomes primary in this painting, right? So like none of them know that Saul has just seen Jesus, but the horse, you can tell, like the horse really gets it. And it becomes about this relationship between Saul and the divine that's mirrored in the horse's reaction to what is going on that nobody else knows is going on. Can we advance? I just want to show you. So Daniele Crespi is a Baroque Italian artist. And if you've ever been to Rome, which you should go as soon as you can, there is a church there, Santa Maria del Popolo, which is a beautiful little church, but it has a chapel called the Chirazi Chapel. And when you go, you'll see these 3 giant paintings in this small, tiny chapel. So it's very overwhelming. But right across from each other, you see 2 paintings by Caravaggio. And the one on the right is the Conversion of St. Paul. So can we advance one more, Stacy, please? Yeah, there we go. So Daniele Crespi is definitely looking at Caravaggio, who's really totally innovative on this subject. It's the first time when you see the conversion of Saul really as if he just fell off this horse, and the horse is becoming a primary focal point of the painting, and the drama of that moment, that intense relationship between the human and the horse, and how this whole drama is going to change his life forever. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. We have so many great images of horses. Is it common to tie up horsetails? I don't know. Does anyone know that?
Keep them out of the mud.
Oh.
Just keeps it tidy.
I hate when my tail gets in the mud.
Mine too. Okay, now we're going to focus in different ways in which the horses have been depicted in the Americas. And I think it's pretty relevant because it has been assumed that the equus cabalus originated in this continent actually, but it was exterminated or disappeared with the last ice age period. They were so cold that they went to Asia and then to Europe to be painted in Lascaux, as Chrissy just showed us. According to this narrative, then the horses were reintroduced in the Americas by Christopher Columbus, especially in his second trip, 1493, when he brought around 20 horses and 5 mares. But some recent archaeological research has been claiming that that's not completely true, and that horses remained at least in North America, and that what would explain why the horses are so relevant in the mythology of Native Americans in the US and in Canada. I don't think we have time to go into that debate right now, but I want to focus now in South America, especially in the Andes, where we know that horses were introduced by Spanish conquistadors around 1529. And what I'm showing you here is one of the very earliest, if not the earliest one, images of the horse after the conquest. And what we're seeing here is an armband that would have been used by one of the local curacas or governors or local authorities. And you can see that they are depicted monkeys and felines, female and male. But at the center of this armband, you see the image of a horse and his rider. And I think it's very interesting to know, many of you have heard that the conquest was actually possible because of the horse and among many other things. horses were actually not that common during the conquest. They were very, very expensive to bring and especially to maintain. And so if you were a Spanish soldier and had a horse, it's because you were very privileged. You were marking your social status among your peers through this ownership of a horse. And so what you are looking at here is indeed a horseman riding a saddle, not a riding side saddle as Elena is asking right now, but it's apparently is on top of the horse. It's just that this artist from Inca tradition is not being really able to understand how to depict the being on top of the horse, but we see it. And it's a particular horse because it has, if you agree with me, rather odd hooves that recall more those of the llama. That was the only domesticated animal in the Andes at the time. And so it's a combination of elements, but what I think is very key in this, and it's something that Tom Cummins has effectively shown, is that the intrusive image of the horse in this object is a result of how this curaca assumed a mediating position between the Europeans and the local peoples. And so it is showing status through the horse in a visual image that would make sense for the Europeans, but in an object that would make sense for the local and traditional culture. So I think it's very interesting how this horse is providing some interesting cues about how this process of mixing of cultures took place. And if we see the next slide, please, we're going to see that the most common image of the horse is not that of cultural exchange, but rather of violent military conquest. And this is how we have learned about the conquest, no, for many, many times. And what we see here is an image of St. James, this Christian fellow of St. Paul that we were also talking about, was an apostle of Christ himself. He traveled the world, he died in Spain. And so after many centuries after he died, Carter is saying that he's not much of a saint if he slays Incas. What I think is interesting is that after a mythical battle in Clavijo in Spain, the Spaniards assumed that they would always be victorious of battles if San James would appear in the middle of the battle. And so when they came to the Americas, San James became the slayer of, from being a slayer of Moors, no, that they were present in the south of the Iberian Peninsula, became the slayer of Indians. And as you can see in this image from the Carl and Marilyn Thoma collection, he became the slayer of the Incas, and we recognize them as such because of their dress. But what I think the important symbolic role here of St. James is that they're trying to create a portable statement that sought to justify the foreign presence in the area. And I'm saying that it's a portable statement because this is a rather small painting, maybe 50 inches high. And so I think it's important to understand that throughout the 3 centuries of the colonial period, it was necessary to reinforce that the Spaniards were being protected by God or through the figure of St. James. What I think is interesting is also to remember that the conquistadors mostly brought with them a specific kind of horse that is called the barbs, that were brought to the Iberian Peninsula from North America by the Moors. And so it's interesting because it is an image that was, St. James were slaying Moors, but the idea of riding a horse that was brought by the Moors, I think, is also interesting. The symbol in red on his cloak here It's the cross that identify him as a patron of the Spanish crown. And other thing that is also interesting is that the way he's riding the horse is also of Moorish influence, and it's called a la jineta. That means that he was able to control much better the horse while in battle, opposed to other kind of horses that you, like in medieval times, where the rider had to have his legs completely straight. And so this bending of the knee was very important for the military actions. What I think is interesting here is that this very war setting doesn't correspond at all with the jolly face of the horse that he's mounting. And then if we go to the next one, we're going to—
Rosario, can I interject a little? Am I wrong in noticing that the horse kind of looks like St. James? Is that intentional, do you think?
I don't know. I think, and maybe that's what I'm going to go later. It's a very distinctive human-like facial feature that you can see in the Andean painting. In Bolivia, there are many paintings like that has horses with this very human sense. We can go to the next one, please. We're seeing here those that we chose for our e-flyer to welcome you, all of you, to this talk. And I think it is interesting because these horses here are pulling a festive carriage that has the Immaculate Conception dressed in blue and white at the opposite side. And they are, it's a massive painting, most likely it's a wall-size painting, most likely made for a church. And this is an image that is celebrating a dogma that was contested for over 5 centuries. And Philip II, the Spanish king, adopted the image as a political banner, as a way to demonstrate that he was, in a way, the heir of St. James, that had the protection of St. James, and he had divine right to rule. And if you believed in Philip II, you have to also believe in the Immaculate Conception. And that's why you also have this character is being dominated at the bottom of the painting. And I think it's very interesting also to consider that Philip II had he established a royal stud to create the best horses in Europe, and he was very aware of the importance of leading, the politics not only through religion but also through horse breeding. And so, in that sense, the horses here are not only a symbol of power and celebration, as we have seen many times in these examples that we have been sharing with you, but also, and in this case, even more so because they are ridden by angels, but even more they become in this painting a reaffirmation of political allegiance. But if we can go to the next one, please. I think it's impossible to miss these features that you were talking about now, Chrissy. They look human. You can say that they look like St. James. I can argue that they look very, very human in general, no?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of questions about that, Rosario. I think it makes sense to me totally. Like in the St. Paul painting, how the horse totally looks human. His muzzle's really short. To me, that's an obvious attempt to make that horse look like a person. That sounds about right?
I love that they really feel like they're part of the celebration. We were just talking about a few minutes ago before we started this interesting conversation with all of you, that one of the horses, the one on the left, you can really see his teeth. And so he's really enjoying the celebration. I don't know. I think the only reason that comes to mind is that it shows how important horses were for the culture, and how nurturing this relationship was. Horses, as Ray mentioned at the very beginning, were used for the war, but also they were used for work, and mainly for transportation. And you know, they are so critical even on today, you know, even from the 16th century, but even for today in Peru, that there is one horse, the Peruvian Paso, that has been named cultural heritage of the nation by the Ministry of Culture, because the horse breeding really is part of this Peruvian identity in contemporary days. This Peruvian Paso, and maybe we can show the next slide, is the one that we're seeing on the right, the white one. And it's a horse that has been bred in Peru since the late 1600s. And it's a horse that is a combination of the Andalusian, you know, this horse that Philip II was creating as part of his his political agenda, and is and a combination with these Barb's horses that were brought by the conquistadors. And so it is very interesting that in Peru, they bred this particular kind of horse that has a special gait that goes in parallel, opposed to in diagonal. And that creates a very soft and gentle ride, which, as you can imagine, becomes very important in a geography as hard as the Andes. When you have to cross the Andes to go from Cusco to Lima to Quito to Buenos Aires later on, you have a lot of commerce going on. And if you are going like this all the time, and you can access to this, Ray.
You're gonna soar.
And you don't want to do that. And so when I was doing research for today's talk, I saw a video and it was incredible. You don't see the rider move at all when it's on top of a Peruvian Paso, because it's so soft that the horse moves his legs, but you don't feel it. And so you can go and go and go on for hours, riding your horse, crossing the Andes, making commercial connections, and voila, you have your amazing horse. And I just want to know what people think. Is it possible that these paintings depict Peruvian Paso? Do you think, you know, one of the characteristics besides the gait is that they have very expressive eyes, they have very pointy ears? And so, I don't know, I don't have an answer. I think, you know, as you were saying with the depiction of the horse in St. Paul, Chrissy, these representations most of the times are not realistic. They allow us to imagine, they allow us to interact with what the horse mean to us as human beings. And I think, you know, it opened questions to how the conquest happened, how people develop certain particular kind of breeds. But what is important is that they're touching our soul and our brain, and they're asking us questions as, are all horses some kind of human? And that's something that Ray asked to all of us at the very beginning. So I'm going to stop here and welcome to the conversation to Florencia, who is going to talk about other kind of horses.
Well, actually, it's not that different of a horse, because I'm going to talk about the caballo criollo, which is also a descendant of the Andalusian horse that the conquerors brought to the Americas. But as you notice, Rosario, every region in the Americas sort of diversified the breed a little bit. But there is a strong connection between the caballo criollo that the gauchos used in Argentina and the caballo criollo that the Mexicans used in Mexico. So let's go to my first image. There you go. So this is a wonderful portrait of by David Alfaro Cicadas of Zapata on a horseback from 1931. It's a lithograph from our collection, which is on view as part of the avant-garde networks of Amauta. So Cicadas was one of the leading modern artists active in Mexico during the early 20th century. And he's known for his epic series of murals. So he considered himself primarily as a political activist and was involved in organizing labor movements until 1930, when he was sent to prison by the government and then sent into internal exile in the town of Taxco. So while he was in Taxco, he was there for like 15 months. He continued painting, but this time just smaller paintings, easel paintings, and this kind of print, this lithograph that he produced during that period. So this is, let's go to the next image, please, is an image of General Emiliano Zapata, who was a leader of the Southern Liberating Army during the 1910s, during the Mexican Revolution. And the story of Zapata is really kind of fascinating because he has a strong connection with horses. He grew up in a rural village in southern Mexico with Mexican peasant communities. I mean, the farmers were being exploited by landowners who took their lands away in collusion with the government. So he stood for, on the side of the small farmers. The Zapata family was actually quite well known in Morelos, in southern Mexico. They were considered really good farmers, and they also raised horses like everyone else did in the region, because they used them as part of the workforce to work the lands. And he became very knowledgeable about horses. So when he was drafted into the army, he was sent to a cavalry regiment, and he became known almost all over the country as one of the best horse tamers and stable managers of his time. So he had a very special connection with his horses. So when the revolution broke out in 1910, Zapata became a central figure of the peasant revolt, leading the Southern Revolutionary Army. So in this portrait by Cicadas, he was probably inspired in drafting this image by this unknown photograph, which is quite famous in Mexico, showing Zapata during the revolution. I mean, this is from 1915. Here we see Zapata. He never wore a military uniform during the revolution. He was quite a dapper man. He was very conscious about his image. He and his fellow horsemen wore the charro outfit that horsemen in Mexico used to wear for a long time, maybe on Sundays or going to celebrations. So they look actually, and this is the charro outfit and the saddle. The charro outfit is the kind of outfit that mariachi bands, the men and women in mariachi bands use. So it's instantly recognizable for those of us in Texas. We know exactly what a charro outfit is. So he looks very, very elegant on his horse, and you can see he has the rifle and he's ready for battle. So let's go to the next image.
Is that a good derby hat, Flor?
It's like a Mexican sombrero, and I wish I got one to wear today. I'm not sure, maybe it's a little bit too big for the derby, but it would be lovely to wear one today.
The people behind you wouldn't like you very much.
So yeah, they couldn't see very much. But if you are in the field riding a horse, it gives you quite a bit of shade. So it's very and protects you from the weather. So it has a pragmatic elements to it. So and we got actually this question about the social status related to the horse, because horse during a long time, only noblemen could have horses, and they were expensive to upkeep. But in Mexico during this period, they were part of rural life. They were part of any farm, and they were bred for working in the farm. And you can see in this beautiful example of Everardo Ramirez and Rancheros, a person and with a detail, a farmer taming a horse and somebody harvesting wheat. So the horse was very much a symbol for rural life in Mexico, not a symbol of the elite, but a symbol of rural life. So let's go to the next image, please. So here we see the Zapatista army entering Mexico City in 1914 with the big sombreros and their beautiful criollo horses. This is an image of a criollo horse, which is quite different. The look is quite different from the Arabic horse, right? It's a different breed. It comes from Berber horse in North Africa, but not from the Arabic Peninsula. So, and it comes through the Andalusian horses that were brought to the Americas. So it's a little bit different. It's a smaller horse. It stands lower to the ground. And it was bred, as I said, for work in the farm, but also for battle, because it was very docile, very resilient. It did not scare very easily, and also could sprint really fast for a short time. So that was when you were charging a war, that was an important quality for the horse to have. Now, the Mexican Revolution that lasted until 1920 was probably the last war to be fought on horseback. Machine guns and armored tanks made the cavalry regiments pretty much obsolete. So let's look at the next image. So here we have Cicadas' image of Zapata on horseback. And it's based mostly on, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Well, I don't, but I think they're right. Somebody asked if those are horses in the background behind Zapata, or if those are mountains. What do you
think? They echo the shape of the horse, but those are mountains. Kind of the rounded volcano mountains that you can find in the Sierra Madre and the highlands in southern Mexico. And that's why the horse was so important during the revolution, because people could not travel through this landscape far. They really needed horses to move around the country, at least during this period.
And those smaller, very agile, tough little horses too to handle that.
Very sturdy. And you can see that the figure is almost as big as the horse. These are not the high horse of the Arabic horse, right? Of a race horse, but it's a different breed.
Yeah. We're getting a lot of questions, Flor, about whether horses are things that only rich people own.
No, as I said, in this case, and this is a really important question, because here we have this image of a general in the Revolutionary Army who stands for the peasants and rural workers and indigenous people who want their lands back. And that's very important because the horse here symbolizes that rural background, the peasants who are supporting his army, who are made of the army. In fact, this is very interesting because the army, the Revolutionary Army, was put together a little bit like a militia. So people from the same region would serve together. So you were fighting next to your fellow farmers in the same area, your family members, they all kept together as a group. So it was this very strong relationship between the members of the army, but also with their animals, because they were the animals they used in the farm to work. It's the same animal.
Can I ask you one more question, Flora, and then I promise I'll be quiet. But Alexandra Hobbs asked a question that I have thought 1,000 times and not asked you, which is, why are Zapata's stirrups so hyper stylized? They're so strange.
I don't know.
So cool.
Like if you're riding through brush, those stirrups will sort of push through and keep you from getting scratched by briars and stuff.
Ah, that makes a ton of sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And also I wonder if in a war situation that protects your feet a little bit better. But I don't know. It's a question I have because it is so strange. I don't have the answer. So
I want to speak just to this question about class expectations around horses. I mean, the thing to always remember is, you know, until the mid 20th century, a lot of people had horses. A lot of people had horses. It's not just in Latin America, but in Europe too, horses are very associated with rural life, with work. And there's a lot of different kinds of horses. They're specifically bred to accomplish different kinds of things. So, you know, and that taps into the point that you were making, Rosario, about national pride of the Peruvian Paso, but that's like everywhere. If you look at Germany, like every different province is proud of their horse breeding program of breeding warm bloods for competition since the 18th century. If you look at the Blanton collection, I picked that one image by Jericho of the boy feeding the cart horse oats, but we have a ton of images of Jericho that link a particular type of horse to a particular region. So this idea of selective breeding, national pride, and function really results in quite a lot of diversity.
Yeah, it's so true. And in fact, this figure of Zapata on horseback and the ideas that he represented that like bread and freedom and the land belongs to those who work it is such an integral part of Mexican nationality. In fact, Zapata in his charro horseman outfit became a very powerful symbol of manhood and strength and a Mexican nationality. In fact, it's such a powerful symbol. I wonder if we could move to the next image.
Let me just add something before we go to this very interesting example.
Is it so weird?
Can we go back, please?
Can we go back?
Can we go back, Stacey, please?
There's no going back after you see that one.
I need a refill, unfortunately.
Stacey, can we go back?
Because what Zapata is doing by appropriating the horse as part of his image is similar to what this curaca was doing in 16th century Peru, with the armband. Is appropriating a symbol of power that they could not access, and then it's making it speak for itself. And it's saying, if the land belongs to those who work it, we're going to use our symbol of work to be presented as a Roman emperor, And so I think it's also interesting, it's not only national identity, but how you are transgressing the system in which you live, and you're making it work for your own purposes, no? Because what the the curaca was doing is appropriating the system that is, pressing the people that are like him, and it's exactly what Zapata was claiming for. No, they wanted the recognition of a system that thought that peasants were not important. Now we can go to the most interesting image in our presentation.
Let's go to the next one, because talking about transgressive, and we can sort of gauge the importance of that image of Zapata on horseback that Rosario was talking about. When very recently there was an exhibition of Zapata's in art, Zapata, the man in art, and how he was represented. And this small painting by Fabian Cicadas was called A Revolution, the Revolution from 1914 from 2014 was included in the show, and it created an international scandal. It was scandalous, and we could go to the next one. And in fact, we were, and you can see a little bit of the detail of the image. This is the Zapata on a white horse, which is not, it's not meant to be historically accurate.
I love the way the frame and he has this great Baroque Spanish frame, and then the painting is totally different. That's so cool.
And he's naked, and he has a pin hat and this Mexican flag around him. His shoes are actually weapons. The stilettos are guns. So it's like an amazing image, right? Completely transgressive and for gay rights and transgender rights. And it presents Zapata as a mythical person, as a mythical rebellion against the establishment, the status quo, you know, this Mexican machismo, right? That the very figure of Zapata helped build. So let's go to the next image. And of course, Zapata family was greatly offended, and they organized a manifestation, a protest inside the Palacio de Bellas Artes, where the exhibition was. And we were actually paying a lot of attention to this, because if you look at the image, you're gonna see the banners of the Avant-Garde Network of Amauta, which was also exhibited in the Palacio de Bellas Artes at the same time.
And it's Blanton when we reopened.
It comes to a circle, because the image of Zapata, our Zapata, it's also part of that exhibition. And if our doors were open, you could go and see it on the walls of the Avant-Garde Networks of Amauta. An important image that emerged in support of the rights of farmers and peasant people in Mexico. So that is, if we could go to the next one, it really, to me, I reached the conclusion that it's still, the image of Zapata on horseback is still a very powerful image in Mexico and in Latin America too.
Well done.
Well, do we know if Zapata was gay? What's the meaning of depicting him in this way?
I think they take the idea of Zapata as being a mythical representative of rebellion, the pure idea of going against the oppressors. And in Mexico, patriarchy is a strong oppressive force.
Not only in Mexico.
I guess they're sort of using an image of the patriarchy, which is Zapata, to go against it. They are the image. It
looks like a Mori Mora almost, don't you think?
What?
Like, it looks like a Mori Mora, like this playing with gender and this playing with symbols of power in the history of art, etc., etc.
Makes me think of Prancer size.
Tony's talking about the phallic component on the rifle, and I think that's completely right. You know, and it's all gender influence, but you know, I don't think Cicadas was aware of all these things. He was just reproducing the image of the national hero.
Right, and he was basing the image on the photograph. But why did that photograph lasted and became so powerful over so many decades? Because it touches something in Mexican culture that has survived and it still survives and is important today. But I did think we have a question whether the patriarchy is bigger than Mexico, and absolutely.
Yeah. Bigger than Mexico.
Yeah, much bigger than Mexico. I would say, you know, globe-wide, yes.
I think we're gonna have to end soon. Maybe we should ask our audience if they have any burning questions left that they need an answer to, that they should type them very quickly right now. We're gonna wait. Or is there anything you guys want to add? How are we doing?
I've got my closing statement.
Everybody's enjoying their drink.
Oh, well, raise your hand if you're still enjoying your drink. Oh, I see a lot of hands. Excellent. Good work. How many of you are having a julep, may I ask? How many of you had a julep today? Kim, Jonathan, Hanny, there's lots of people. We're doing great. Okay.
Okay, looks like that's it for tonight's conversation. Thanks to all of you for joining us. And before you leave, here are a few reminders. Our next curated conversation will be next Tuesday, May 12th at 5 p.m. The topic is What Makes a Mother? Variations on Maternal Art. And this will feature a live Q&A with Holly Borum and our returning guests, Rosario and Chrissy. They'll both be here next week at 5 o'clock. If you want to watch past curated conversations or take virtual art tours, explore other aspects of the Museum from Home content, go to the blantonmuseum.org oh, there it is. Excellent. If you'd like to show your support, you can become a member. We really appreciate our members. You make a big difference for us.
Thank you.
Or you can support our Blanton Together Fund at blantonmuseum.org/support. A gift in any amount is appreciated and helps us bring cultural and educational resources to our community. And finally, if you have topics you'd like to see us cover in future curated conversations, drop us a line at media@blantonmuseum.org. So
we miss you. I miss you. We miss you.
Thank you, everyone.
Hope you'll be looking for real art soon.
Yes. Can we just leave now? No. Bye, guys.
Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Come see us. Bye.